Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special broadcast of Twitch Science Week. I am Eric Johnson, or EJ_SA on Twitch, your host here tonight, or today, depending on where you are in the world. Twitch Science Week is about celebrating all things science, and this entire week we're going to have panels from everywhere, all over the place, in NASA, some other places. That might be pretty interesting, and I will bring you to introducing them in a second. Also, towards the end of this roundtable, we will have a Q&A with questions from the chat. So if you do have questions during the cast, we will be able to answer them. We'll screen a couple of questions here. Now, let me introduce you to the people that we have here. So, our first person on the roundtable here, our first guest is Fraser Cain. Fraser Cain is the publisher of Universe Today, which was founded in 1999. He also works on he's the co-host of the Astronomy podcast with Dr. Pamela Gay. And he's an advocate for citizen science in astronomy. And he's on the board of directors for CosmoQuest. Fraser, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Second person we have here today on this roundtable discussion is Ariane Cornell. Ariane Cornell is Blue Origin's head of astronaut strategy and sales, and the head of North American sales for the New Glenn rocket. Prior to Blue Origin, she was executive director of the Space Generation Advisory Council, and she was a senior consultant with Booz Allen Hamilton's Aerospace and Defense Group. She earned a Bachelor's of Science from Stanford University and an MBA in Harvard University. Ariane, welcome.
Hey, AJ, thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for coming by. And then down, bringing up the tail end of the guests here on our round table today is Matthew Buffington, the Director of Public Affairs for NASA's Ames Research Center. It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it's a fun job.
Let's see. Before joining NASA, Matthew served as a diplomat and the Acting Assistant Secretary for the Digital Strategy at the U.S. Department of State.
Sounds fancy.
Yeah, that sounds pretty fancy to me.
Not nearly as cool as working at NASA, I just have to say.
He studied public relations and political science at Brigham and Young University and got a master's in public administration at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, and I think they just hear not rocket scientist.
Not rocket scientist? Well, we'll see. I'm pretty sure you know your stuff. Just putting that out there. Okay, so we're going to move into a Q&A. I have a couple of questions here for our for the viewers here, for the guests that we have on the show tonight, and we're just going to start it off. I'm just going to go down the list, guys. I'm just going to fire off a couple of questions. So, Fraser, why space? What got you into it?
Way to start with
Why space? We were actually just talking about this just before the show, right?
Absolutely.
Which is like I think for almost anybody who has any involvement in the space industry, be it working with NASA or being a journalist like myself, science fiction, being exposed to the missions and stuff that was happening at a really early age. I remember I think my dad woke me up in 1981 to watch the first space shuttle launch, and he had seen the first moon landings, and he was so excited to share that love of astronomy and space exploration with me, and then watching Star Trek and Star Wars and all that kind of stuff got me super hooked on space, and it's been had been a big chunk of my brain for a long time. I did a column in high school about what to see in the night sky for my school newspaper. I ran star parties as a teenager.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so I've been into space for my whole life, and I'm really glad that I've kind of been able to dedicate my life to it, which is awesome.
Great. Ariane, what got you into it?
Well, so for me, my mother was a specialist in something called probabilistic risk analysis, and she actually did a study on the tile protection system on the belly of the space shuttle. And so to wrap her head around it, she brought home one of these professional models of the space shuttle. Yeah. And I remember being very young, and so I asked her if I could help her paint it. So of course she gave me just the black to do the belly because you can't mess it up. I remember painting it and looking at that and being like, that is super cool. And that kind of led to first internship at NASA Ames. So bringing it back to the family here.
Stomping grounds.
It's good to be back in the Bay. And so ever since, it's just been an extraordinary ride. And as Fraser mentioned, I feel so fortunate to be able to work in an industry with such a long-term, extraordinary vision. And even if we're just a small part of it, it's a blessing. So
Yeah, very much so. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, well, it was funny because when you're talking about movies at the last Twitch stream earlier this week, they're talking about movies and pop culture, and the standard response is always like Star Trek or Star Wars. Mine was a little bit of a deep cut 1984 Space Camp.
nice.
Yes.
Anybody remembers that?
Absolutely.
That's what got you
It's a great
inspired.
movie.
That was the one, because I
awesome.
wanted to be Joaquin Phoenix with a little Technodrome-looking robot following me
Yeah.
around. But yes, ever since I was a kid, I was like super into NASA. Even as getting older, starting into the workforce, I've always followed like the NASA subreddit and following the stuff that's online and tech blogs. Really into it, and just got fortunate enough that I saw a job posting over at NASA Ames, and I was like combining Silicon Valley and NASA and making your hobby into a job. So I think you know a little bit about that, playing Kerbal for a living.
Oh, jeez, don't get me started. It's been a crazy ride. I mean, I didn't think it was going to get as big as it did, but it turns out there's a lot of people out there that are actually pretty interested in space. I'd assume that's why some folks are watching here today.
Yeah,
Probably.
absolutely.
But it's also really cool to see how there's almost been this space renaissance, if you
Oh,
will.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We're kind of nerds that have been in it for a while now, but it's great to see the popular following of space
Yeah.
and seeing that rev up back up again.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched, I've been doing this since 1999, and I've been writing stories about it, and so I really have seen there was sort of the real diehard people back in the early 2000s watching the shuttle launches and the construction of the space station, but there was it wasn't as high in the public eye as it has been in the last couple of years. And I think that, we're in really the golden age of enthusiasm for this, and now there's all these great systems coming together, all these great rockets that I think everyone is just going to blow their minds the next couple of years.
Yeah, and okay, so Arian, I'm going to pick your brain for a second, if that's okay.
of
Now,
course.
with this renaissance that you were talking about, Fraser, everybody seems to be moving into sort of reusable tech. Now, why would reusable tech be, like with the New Shepard, for
Right.
instance, why would reusable be better than, I suppose, to like a vehicle, like an expendable launch vehicle, which in the past they've taken, they launched a rocket and the first stage falls into the ocean. So why do you think reusability is really necessary to move forward in the space
Right.
meta?
So at Blue, our vision is millions of people living and working in space. So the only way that you get there is by bringing down the cost of accessing space. And the way to do that is through reusability, right?
Absolutely.
People use this analogy all the time. If you're flying from, San Francisco to New York, you don't throw away the airplane once you get to New York. We reuse it, right?
Absolutely.
So, and what we've been able to do at Blue is develop rockets that launch and land and do it again and again. So with our New Shepard rocket, our suborbital rocket, our last rocket launched into space and landed 5 times in total. Same rocket, same hardware. So we're very excited to see where it's going to go, but you need that reusability.
Absolutely.
And for Blue, yes, we're starting with this suborbital rocket with New Shepard. But the idea is to roll it into our orbital program with New Glenn, which will be our big rocket that's coming online
cool.
around 2020. And I think we're seeing our video here of the New Shepard launch there. So that's
wow.
a view from the
Look at that.
capsule over 100 kilometers. So when you guys come flying with me,
Right.
which is going to be soon here, this is what you're going to see. So the whole flight is about 11 minutes. The crew capsule launches with the rocket at about 75 kilometers. The crew capsule and the rocket separate.
Look at that.
You get your 4 minutes. You buckle back in. That capsule comes down, as you just seen, but then the rocket also comes down there. So at only 3,600 feet, we relight the engine, our BE-3 engine, and it comes in for a super soft, precise landing back in our landing pad in Texas. You see that hover there?
Look at that.
So
That is wild.
So the way that we're able to do that is because on our BE-3 engine, it's a deeply throttleable engine. So that's it's like a jet engine on an airplane,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You launch, you gun it while you're taking off, but then when you're coming back into land, you pull back on the throttle. And so most rocket engines throttle back maybe to 75% of their power.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can get down, if we max at 110,000 pounds of thrust, we can pull it back to 20,000 pounds of thrust.
That's pretty impressive,
So it
to say the least.
smoothly comes back in. So that's what reusability
awesome.
is about. And you got to build in the technologies and the subsystems into the rocket from the beginning.
Absolutely. Okay, Matt, moving on to you. What? So you're the PR, your main PR guy at Ames.
Basically.
What projects are you excited to tell people about going on over at Ames?
Well, it's funny because like a lot of times, when people think of NASA, they don't necessarily think of the Bay Area or Silicon Valley. It's always you go to Florida where they launch rockets, or to Houston where they train the astronauts. And oftentimes when you get, at least from the NASA side, when you're getting these payloads, you're sending people into space, or no matter where it is, it's like, what are you going to do there? And most of the time it's science, and so a lot of those science experiments come from the different research centers. You have one at Ames, you have one over at Glenn Research Center over in Ohio, also in Virginia over at Langley. But building on to Ariane, what she was talking about, the cool thing that I like about NASA, which a lot of people tend to forget, is the first A in NASA is Aeronautics.
That's right.
And even if you're driving down south and you see these big wind tunnels and all these testing, but I see that as such a parallel to where we are right now. Because, the early days of aeronautics, when the government was heavily, building airplanes for World War I, or, the airmail, where it was paying companies to fly mail around the world, through, around the United States. And that slowly pivoted from government to public-private partnerships, to Pan Am, to then a fully fledged multi-billion-dollar industry where NASA still has a role in aeronautics, but it's research.
Yeah,
it's like we're looking at making things more fuel efficient, faster, safer, quieter, whether it's X planes or supersonic planes. But has that as a parallel to the space industry is what's really exciting, because we're at that point where it was government, then now we are in like this public-private international partnerships, and as we start pivoting to that being a fully fledged, industry where we have, Blue Origin, we have these other companies, in this space. It's like literally and figuratively. It's just a really exciting time to be in as you start seeing this as a commercial industry become a viable thing. It's really exciting.
It's really starting to get up there. It's really cool seeing the aeronautical research that Ames does. It's very interesting stuff. Fraser, I'm going to throw the ball over into your court if you don't mind. So you're a major advocate for citizen science. Now, is that astronomy?
Mainly astronomy. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
so one of the things that we experience with the podcast that we do and with having the website is that we have a lot of fans and they want to get involved in the astronomical research, but they maybe went into computer science, or maybe they're a teacher, or maybe they're a mechanic, and so they are fascinated and they know a tremendous amount about space and astronomy, but they just didn't happen to make it their career, but they still want to get involved. And so what we've done with CosmoQuest is created this partnership where we've got all these great tools where citizen scientists can come in and do fairly complicated, sometimes simple work, sometimes very complicated work, to say map out craters on the moon, or map out craters on Mars, or help search for new targets for New Horizons, projects like that, and then bring all of that science data, and then that gets delivered to the scientists who can then do their research papers. And so it's this middle range of stuff that computers are really bad at, humans are really good at, but you need a lot of humans to kind of bring that science together.
Absolutely.
But you can answer these really fundamental questions about how old are parts of the moon, or when did those features form on Mars? And so we've been doing a lot of work to try and just cross that gulf and let anyone who's an enthusiast be able to do work and actually have that work contribute to research. And then on top of that, we run Cosmo Academy, where if you're a real enthusiast and you want to take your knowledge to the next level, you can do an online course with a PhD astrophysicist, or someone researching black holes, or someone working in astrobiology, and just learn their knowledge in that field.
Absolutely.
It's not a degree, but you've had a chance to learn directly from a person who understands that information, and now you understand it too. And so we're trying to see how far we can push the amateurs to really contribute to the science.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm a firm believer that, if the more minds you have thinking about solving a problem, the more likely it's going to get solved. So that's really huge, bringing, people that wouldn't necessarily be in the folds into the folds to help overcome these goals that we have to reach out into the solar system and ultimately beyond that. That's very
once
cool.
you give people a mechanism to be able to contribute, the level that they can contribute just blows your mind.
Absolutely.
I think something important coming out of that is people think, well, to work in the space industry, you just need to be an astrophysicist. Well, I'm not an astrophysicist, so I've got nothing to contribute. Absolutely not. I mean, a blue, for example, we hire people that, with software backgrounds, so if anybody's watching out there, you're, excited about joining a space company, please, hit us up. But, mechanical engineering, you've got chemi. We need all those people that are there. And so, even though you may not end up in the space industry, you can still contribute to what's going on.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, Fraser, do you have anything?
I was just going to say, when we look at what right now, everyone's focusing their attention on the rockets, right? And the joke that I always make is like with SpaceX, they're going to bring you. They're going to send 400 people to the surface of Mars, and then what are they going to do there, right? Someone's got to figure out.
If they survive the radiation.
Yeah, and then they just get out. Now we're taking this rocket back. That's
why you need the doctors, though, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, who's going to take care of them, and how are they going to build things, and what are they going to eat, and how are they going to deal with the air, and how are they going to be entertained, and how are they going to communicate back with Earth, and how are they going to make their computers work? Like, there's so much to be done and figured out across the board. And if you're in any way enthusiastic about this field, there are tremendous opportunities to get involved.
Like, even over at NASA, it's one of those funny things where people, they think of like the astronauts, you think even the research and the scientists, but for the most part, NASA has almost, at least it aims, it's a 50-50 split between what they call like the mission and then mission support. You have lawyers, you have comms people, you have budget people, you have program managers. There's a lot of things that you don't want your engineers, your scientists, your researchers worrying about to help support and make that stuff happen. So I'm like, anybody who's into NASA, into the space industry, it's like, there's a place for you, no matter what you're studying, whether, STEM, STEAM, no matter what it is, there's a place that, you can get in here.
I mean, I always try to tell people on the stream that, you don't need to do that. I mean, even getting into trades. I mean, a rocket engine, for instance, like the BE-3, has a lot of plumbing on it. So plumbers, you could pop right in and work on the assembly line, working on the plumbing for the rocket. It's not that far off.
Extraordinary team of machinists, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our guys who work on the floor are. And by the way, they are just as pumped about what we're doing at Blue as
Absolutely.
As the people that are working in business development and strategy, or those that are doing the CFD on the rocket. I mean, you need the whole team doing it.
Absolutely.
And by the way, they come from all sorts of different fields. We've got one guy that does speedboat racing. He's like a professional speedboat racer, but he also helps work on our rockets. So that's the type of
sounds pretty cool.
mixed minds we got going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so Fraser, you were touching on the fact of, going to Mars and landing on Mars. Why this is more of an open question for everybody. Yeah. Why do you think Mars is so popular right now, as opposed to, say, maybe the moon? Like, why not make a base on the moon first and use that as a training facility? Why go straight to Mars? And it's just open-ended, so, I mean, go for it.
Well, I tend to like the answer of all of the above.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong, me too.
But the thing is, it's like, the common phrase is like, space is hard. But it's like, we don't have to do this alone. It's like everybody has a role to play, whether that's in the commercial space or whether it's the government. But people think of NASA, but you also have ESA, you have the Canadians, the Japanese, the Russians. There's different roles to play. I mean, even at NASA, focusing on the SLS, on building a big rocket to get you to Mars. But it's a phased process. Phase one being International Space Station, where we are now, looking at cislunar. So, moon and then the area around it is a proving ground, and then eventually to Mars. Because there's a lot of learning that still needs to happen before that can go there. But it's like, there's roles for everybody to play in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
I like, actually, your boss's position on this, which is, I think a lot of the SpaceX and people with Musk and in that community are very focused on Mars, but I really agree that Earth is the best place.
Yes.
Right? It's the best planet, and that one of the reasons to I mean, for sure we should visit, but we should, a lot of the development of these tools and techniques and systems is to get a lot of this heavy industry off the planet, to keep this place as nice as it can be and start to utilize the resources in the solar system. Mars is one possibility, the moon is another possibility. Personally, I more prefer the moon, and in fact, I more prefer some kind of orbital space station, things like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that personally it would be nice if the next step from the International Space Station was just a better International Space Station, but maybe it had a rotating habitat, and maybe it was on a little bit of a bit of a higher orbit, and we could just practice all those things, because someone just passed the record for American spaceflight.
Right.
So we're live longer, go further, figure out where the things are going to break, fix them, improve better versions.
Yep.
And as I mentioned, all those things that need to be solved, right? How are you going to eat? How are you going to clean your air? How are you going to go to the bathroom? How are you going to... There's so many things to figure out.
The key thing to that is it's technology drives exploration. It's like no matter what you end up doing, it's like at the end of the day, it is, especially looking at Earth, it's like when you're doing these, like the moon shot or the Mars shot, when you're stretching out, whether it's trying to build bases, there's technologies, there's things that you're learning about. If you can survive a trip to Mars, you gotta be really efficient with your electricity, really efficient with your water, and then that's all lessons we can learn and apply, technologies that eventually can get spun off and applied here in the real world so we can be more efficient with our own resources. And a lot of times that technology to drive that drives exploration can make life better for us here on the planet.
I just want to touch on something that Fraser mentioned. Yes, we need to. I think we need to think about this in a step-by-step approach. Our motto at Blue is "Gradatum ferociter," or in Latin, "Step by step, ferociously." And to be able to get there, there's some really important steps we need to figure out first. We were talking earlier, science fiction is very cool, but it's got these long-term visions and people are really excited to get there. Okay, but there's some really important building blocks, and I think, and obviously where we at Blue have decided to focus on is the reusable launch vehicle.
Absolutely.
Because if you've only got one shot every 6 months to get up there and figure out what's going on, it's not as good as if you are practicing and looking at it much more frequently, and you can't do it at a price point where we are right now when you're not using reusable systems.
I mean, I think that's one of the big advantages of the reusable system. I mean, a lot of people are focused on the cost, like, you don't throw away your jetliner and you refuel it. But I think one of the big advantages with having when you think about a car that gets used, they test them a lot and they find out where they break, and then they take the part that breaks and they fix that part, and then they keep going. And so if you've got these, the New Shepard coming back and you've got the same one launching 100 times, you really understand which parts are going to be weathering, which parts are going to be failing. Like, that's, to create reliability, I think, is a next big step in this whole process.
Absolutely. And we talk about reusability at Blue, but we talk about operational reusability. So if you're bringing something back home and then you got to tear the whole thing apart and then figure out what's going on, you put it together and it's,
refurbishing, and
it's millions of dollars, and it takes a ton of time, and you might as well have just built a new one. That doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely.
But you need to you need to think about reusability from the very beginning, and how do you operate it in a way that makes sense. And so, people have wondered again, why are we starting with New Shepard, the suborbital vehicle? We can launch and land this thing for at least 1/50th the cost of an orbital vehicle. We can do it fast. We can practice a lot.
Yep.
It's all part of the bigger
lessons
plan
for down the road.
Right?
Absolutely.
So,
Now, Fraser, you touched base about, once we take those steps to moving into reusability and, say we do reach that point, and this is another open-ended question, so we can go back and forth as need be. Asteroid mining. Do you think where do you think that is in terms of, like, optimistic scenario in the future? Like, where does that fall into place in step-by-step plan, if at all? I'm throwing some hardballs.
I'll take a first crack at it, and then you can tell me the realism of it. I mean, to be able to survive in space, you've got to live off the land. You've got to be able to live off the resources that are there in space. Yeah. And all of the resources that we require are out there in space. There is water. There are the different kinds of metals, the different organic compounds and things like that. And they're finding these all around the solar system. And makes the most sense to take them from the moon or from an asteroid. And there are these asteroids that are in very similar orbits to Earth, and so they actually don't require a lot of delta V to get to them, to extract resources off them, and to bring those back. But you want to keep that stuff in orbit, in Earth orbit, keep it out in space, and utilize it there. And I would love to see some efforts made to go and extract resources. I mean, we've got OSIRIS-REx, which NASA is doing. They're going to be pulling a sample back from an asteroid in a couple of years. But more and more emphasis on that, on utilizing the resources of space, because the whole endeavor is going to just depend on us being able to do that.
I agree with that. I'm glad that there are companies and agencies that are looking at it. NASA, the JAXA has done it as well. If you look at mining projects in the U.S., they are actually operating on 20 to 30 year cycles as well, right? So it's not all that far off if you think about a business that's trying to look at how do we mine resources. Talking about step by step, it's going to take some iterations to get there. But I fully applaud their efforts. I'm really glad that somebody is thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting. But like one of the things I also kind of think of, it's like whether you're looking at asteroids, you're looking at Mars. There's also that how this plays into supercomputing, artificial intelligence. Because when you're, if you had a base over on Mars, or you're talking to somebody working there really far out and an asteroid trying to pull it back, that communication back to Earth, it's like you have the speed of light. You have a huge problem if you're trying to joystick something from Earth. And one of the cool things that I have been chatting with folks over at Ames about is the artificial intelligence, the ways that you can make human robotic teaming, where you can set it up so that when people are outside, look in these faraway places, you don't have to wait for that huge communication channel back and forth with a delay of like hours. Instead of you develop that technology where the robot is, for the most part, like self-sufficient. It knows what it needs to do. It knows it's if this happens, then do that. And for the most part, can ask bigger questions where you're just telling the robot, here is the mission of what we want you to accomplish, and then let it solve those problems.
That asteroid.
That's exactly.
Sounds like fun. Okay, so we're going to move over into some of the viewer-asked questions here on the stream now. I have a little monitor over here telling me all the viewer questions here. We're going to start off with a question from Mr. J Speed. Once again, we're going to keep it very open-ended, very relaxed.
Sure.
Mr. J Speed asks, do the panelists have a preference on where we should focus our future space endeavors, Earth-based climate science or space exploration to Mars, the moon, and whatnot? I mean, we touched base on this a little bit, but I mean, do you think those iterative steps that we are talking about moving into, do you think, we should focus here, or like, for instance, for climate science, go out to Mars and study that for a little while? I mean, I think we should do both.
Yeah, why don't make us choose?
Yeah, exactly. Why not both?
I was just going to...
Well, that's kind of the nature of the scientific community in general. NASA is a player in that, but it's a part of the scientific community. And it is good to have big projects where everybody can kind of rally around, but you don't want to give up on that synergy of people working on different projects and different things that come up with different ideas. I mean, even in the federal space, we work a lot with the U.S. Geological Survey. The folks that were here in the San Francisco area are actually moving over to Ames, where we're working side by side. We like to call it, from orbit to core. Working on it, and that pivots into the Earth science function, where NASA's very focused on data collection. The satellites are going over, and it's relevant to not only like the changing planet, but it's like you gotta think of weather patterns, agricultural resources, disaster response. There's all kinds of stuff that are heavily dependent on this data, and it's not just the NASA satellites looking in. Working with the USGS of some tagging on animals, where you can kind of get an idea of where migration patterns and stuff like that can help you understand and better understand our planet. Because tell you what, it's one thing to look at exoplanets or to look at Jupiter or even Pluto, but it's like when we're trying to study other planets, we have a good example right here. If we're looking for life in other places, we need to understand it here so that we know what we're looking for.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, I think my preference I mean, one, I think it's sad that you even have to choose, right? That is it human space exploration versus scientific exploration, and that seems like a very mean and artificial choice to make, to set the astronauts against the scientists and make them fight each other to the death. It's very cruel every year. But
Space makes everything better.
yeah, and so I think that if I was running NASA, I would really try to more separate and have space exploration be one whole thing, because how are we going to live in space if we don't send humans to space and have them live, right? And that's the beginning and the end, I think, of that job. It's to figure out how to live longer, live further, do more in space. And then on the other side is all this amazing stuff that's being done by science, the robotic exploration of the other planets, of the moons of this solar system. There's so much to learn, so many places to go, and to have one budget that then gets broken up and between those two camps is kind of sad. And so I really wish.
Why do you think that is? You think that's a question of education?
It's
global education?
No, I think it's the way NASA's job is to explore space, and NASA has aeronautics and astronomy and various science, but also human space exploration. And if one thing is running over budget, like say the space shuttle or the space station, then it has to draw a budget. Other projects have to get canceled, and that whole thing seems artificial.
Well, in some ways, it kind of seems like like with those. I mean, it's a $19 billion budget, you know.
Yeah.
But it is kind of split up. You get the aeronautics, human, the science directorate, and like it is. It's like some projects kind of come and go, and I try to. And some people get really frustrated and upset because their favorite project was killed.
Yeah.
But it's like. It's kind of a feature and not a bug. I think of Kepler, the Kepler mission alone, which was proposed out of Ames. That failed maybe like 5 or 6 times. It was proposed and then kicked back, proposed and then kicked back. And it was just when it finally went out, I mean, it rewrote textbooks. It's the proof that every single star has at least one planet around it. But yeah, and the funny thing is, especially being at Ames, having such a vast, wide portfolio, is how much people do tend to work with each other, where we'll have people in aeronautics are working with the supercomputing people, who are also then working with the intelligence systems, who are working with the exoplanets and the astrobiologists. There is a lot of ebbing and flowing, and where people kind of work together. So.
But do you think that we could get more of those projects funded if there were a better educational push outward, whether it's to our politicians or to the public, about why it shouldn't be a zero-sum game?
I suspect that NASA specifically is sort of at maximum funding. Like, it's found its where people tend to want to give it an amount of money. And I think it's going to be the private space industry, folks like you, folks like SpaceX, other companies that are going to help bring down the costs and allow more, more missions to be done. Provide the infrastructure, because whether you're going to send up a space telescope or send up an astronaut, you need a rocket. And if the rocket is less expensive, then that's the best thing.
Awesome.
Okay, that was a great question from Mr. J Speed. We're moving on to another question asked by Lundprod, and I suppose this would kind of go more towards you, Ariane. What kind of training will tourists need to go through to fly on New Shepard?
Sure. So let's say you're you're coming to fly with us, New Shepard.
When are we doing that?
She gave us the invite at the beginning of the show. So
you guys, well, we'd love to fly with all of you guys for sure. But let's say you were flying on a Wednesday.
Okay.
You'd come into Texas late on Monday. You'd get to meet the rest of your crew. So we fly out of West Texas.
Yeah.
So by the way, that's near Van Horn. So you'd meet the rest of your crew. You'd meet what we call crew member 7. So that's going to be the person that trains you to fly. You're going to go to bed early because you got to be rested, because the day before flight is when we give you a full, intense but very fun day of training. So they're going to teach you all the crucial things that you need. So ingress, how do you get into the capsule? How do you buckle in? Egress, how do you get out of the seat, out of the hatch? We're going to teach you some emergency procedures because we want to make sure that you guys are prepared and feel comfortable. We're also going to teach you about zero-G etiquette. So then when we're all up there and we're doing our somersaults, there's no
hit somebody in the
Avoiding
face.
each other's
yeah,
vomit.
exactly. No Matrix scenes, no kung fu
need to have a
fighting in
protocol.
there. Yeah, we gotta make sure that everybody gets to enjoy the flight, and that is it. But we're gonna keep it compact, but we're gonna make sure that you feel comfortable when you go up on your flight. If we're gonna have millions of people living and working in space, we want to make sure that it's not something that takes weeks and weeks and weeks to train for.
Absolutely.
We want to make you feel prepared, but like when you go on an airplane these days, you get a couple of minutes
yeah.
of education, and then you're ready to go. We want Spaceflight one day to be like that.
Would you recommend that I skip breakfast?
No, because it's the most important meal of the day. Absolutely
All right.
not. No, we think you're going to want to have your energy, and actually, we're pretty confident that you're gonna have a good ride, and you're not gonna feel nauseous. It's one parabola, and when we've seen people, for example, when they go on NASA's
What do they call that?
say again.
What do they call that plane?
I think it's 0G.
The 0G. There's got some
Your
other
zero-
name.
Partial
There's other
gravity
name,
plane.
there's some other
It's
name for
vomit
it.
There's a bunch of
Oh,
different
that's
planes
it. That's
that-
right.
The
But
vomit comment.
Yeah.
You wanted us to say it, right?
But what we've seen from those types of flights, those parabolic flights, is that people are, if they get sick, it's parabola 6, 7, 8.
That's a really good point.
It's a delayed effect,
Yeah, you're
really.
spending that time like at the amusement park, and you're getting sick by the end of the day.
And this
not
is
that first ride.
It's
yeah.
not the first ride, and we think that you're, with that one parabola, the 4 minutes, you're going to enjoy every second of it. So yeah, eat as big of a breakfast
All
as
right.
you need, Fraser.
All right.
I mean, I think, you were harkening back to when NASA was doing aeronautical research, and this is when the NACA was still around. I'm sure there was a point where they had to train people about the etiquette of flying on a plane when it was a newer technology, and you see that step-by-step process of us extending our reach further off of the surface with what you're talking about. You step in one day, make sure your tray and seat back is in the upright and long. You know what I'm doing?
I love that
So you start to
term.
see that. Yeah.
I love that term, the weightless etiquette. I think we're going to write an article on that.
Zero-G etiquette, excellent. I'd be happy to ask
Yeah,
more,
that would be
answer
great.
more questions
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah,
And
we'll do.
also,
Sorry about that.
And it falls into a lot of the research, and some of that's the research that's going on in the space station is also understanding how humans survive and live in 0G, or how does bacteria, how is that affected when you're in zero gravity? Because we've learned that, on our podcast, I was chatting with a guy about a project called eCamSat, which is, they found out that, bacteria actually grows faster and better, in zero gravity.
Yeah.
Probably a good thing to sort out before we head over to Mars. And so he'd worked on this whole project, not in the space station, but actually in like a small sat, or in like those CubeSats,
CubeSats.
in a whole like laboratory in a can, where the goal is to send it up, run these like experiments in 0G, and bring the data back. And that's one of those that I believe it's just waiting in line for a private rocket to ride on. But it's like there's a lot of stuff that that we need to learn about humans, in advance of all this stuff.
Yes,
So.
and again, just one more reason why we're very happy with our New Shepard rocket is there are a lot of things that even just in the 4 minutes of very clean Gs you can get that you can then you go to the ISS, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a proving ground for all sorts of for all sorts of things.
Absolutely. Okay, Lenprod, great question, buddy. Thank you very much. Our next question is coming in from Yargnit, and here's kind of my good question here. So I stream on Twitch. I play Kerbal Space Program, and I use it to teach people about what's going on up in space. Now, the real question is, who here has played? And if you have you used it as concepts to bring back to your respective works to explain different things and potentially stuff that you wouldn't have thought of?
Yeah, so I tell people that I've learned more about the way spaceflight works in playing Kerbal Space Program than I've done in all of my time as a space journalist. That it's one thing to report like, and the rocket's gonna, the second stage is gonna go off at this time, and it's gonna reach apoapsis at this point, and it's gonna do a burn to geostationary orbit. And it's another thing to make the rocket do those things. and to actually get it up in orbit, to understand at a sort of, that you're actually controlling the rocket and putting in these kinds of orbits and doing these kinds of trajectory burns. I learned a tremendous amount thanks to Kerbal Space Program. Now, I still suck at it, and there's a lot of Kerbal graves, but it's a
Kerbals.
many brave Kerbals died in teaching Fraser how spaceflight works. But it is absolutely terrific, and I recommend anybody who is fascinated by this topic and hasn't spent time playing with Kerbal Space Program. Oh, they're going to show it's going to show a winner. All right.
Oh, look at that! It's mining an asteroid.
That's beautiful.
Or moving. It looks like it's moving.
Yeah.
Cool.
That is just like spend a couple of hours, get a rocket to orbit, put a rocket. Feel free to do a hard landing on the moon. You will understand all of the challenges and understand how this whole thing works. It's the fastest way to learn about spaceflight. It's a great game.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I can see why you've dedicated your life to it.
Oh, it's been fun.
Pays the bills.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. It's a pretty good time. All right, have you made a new Shepard in Kerbal?
Personally, no, I have not. But I have seen that there are some people that have made a new Shepard in Kerbal, and it's just cool to see people latching on to New Shepard and what we're doing at Blue, and I'd love to see more out there trying to recreate New Shepard.
I get you covered there.
Right on, excellent.
We'll make it work.
Right.
Matt, what about you? A lot of Kerbal graves or no?
Yeah. Well, we were chatting before. I tried it once and it just wasn't happening for me. I crashed and burned hard, and I was like, I went to my Wii U and played Affordable Space Adventures instead. It was a little bit more my speed of my gaming prowess.
Absolutely.
My Kerbal career ended prematurely, sadly.
No problem. All right. Yargnet, thank you for that question. We're going to move on to a couple more questions here on the Q&A. The next one is coming from Hawkville, who asks, are there any plans on promoting space exploration to younger viewers? Things like National Geographic's coverage of Mars when they were showing about early reusable rockets seem to be few and far between. So, I mean, what are you guys doing in terms of outreach? Like in Fraser, obviously, that's you and me are kind of in the same kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any distinction. I literally don't consider the age of the viewer when I explain this stuff, because I find that some of our youngest viewers, some of our youngest fans, I mean, people who are 6 years old, they get it. They understand if they're fascinated by it, they understand what's going on. And I think you don't want to dumb it down. I think you want to explain the topics. Don't dig into the math too hard, but by all means, explain the concepts and explain what the science is doing and get those concepts across. So I don't really feel like there's a need to do a distinction. If people are fascinated by this stuff, they're going to be fascinated. And if you feel like you have to dumb it down, they're probably not going to be digging it.
There you go.
I very much agree with that. I was very fortunate to have two parents that were engineers, and it was never dumbed down. But I think one of the ways, so at Blue, what are we doing to engage with younger audiences? So on New Shepard, not only will we be flying humans soon, but we already are flying payloads in the capsules during our test flights. So we'll have experiments that are going up, and those experiment spaces are available to, of course, the universities and the research labs around the world, but also K through 12.
Oh yeah.
Right. So
absolutely.
we're going out and we're already making those areas accessible. And I think frankly, also just by talking about space and our webcasts and such,
doing what we're doing right now.
Yeah, right
Absolutely.
now we're really excited to engage the next generation. Obviously, that's how we all got involved. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Just last weekend, we were completely engrossed in the Silicon Valley Comic-Con. You had Kishore on yesterday, who does the Bay Area Science Festival. But I also, NASA, we always try to make a presence at South by Southwest, the San Diego Comic-Con. Just put a lot of effort into just being out there and being a part of these conversations. And even in pop culture, one of the things when I came to Ames that I quickly realized was and I work with a team of science communicators, who are doing NASA's social media, who are making video products, and my team, we even work on creating the iOS app, the Android app. We just put one on Apple TV and Fire TV as well. But working with these groups, I quickly realized that, especially at Ames, is the portfolio was so big and so vast and covering so many things, and we'd have all these articles that would pop up. You see them in your social media feeds, but it's kind of like it gets into the weeds about what different science projects, different missions. I always wondered what was behind the person who was actually working on it, and so this is my plug of a podcast that we ended up starting. We call it like NASA in Silicon Valley, where it's not getting too far in the weeds of the technical aspects of it, but it's just like talking to the different people who work, learning about like how did they join NASA, like what did they first start working on. Very conversational, very just like getting to know people, and just it's almost kind of like listening in on just like on a stranger's conversation. But it's one of those cool things when you see the complete diversity of people coming from different areas. But yeah, so the NASA in Silicon Valley podcast, I was actually chatting with some other folks over at Johnson and over at NASA headquarters. They actually have a master podcast that they've created called NASA Casts. And what they've done, which was really smart, because there's all these different NASA podcasts, they created one master podcast to rule them all, where no matter if you subscribe to that one, you're going to get all of the podcasts that NASA does. And it just has regular like content popping in there. So, you can read the stuff or you can listen to it. It kind of works out very well.
You guys do a lot of great stuff for reaching out to kids. And I think that's really exciting. I mean, obviously, that's one of the ways I got involved.
Totally.
And with the reach that NASA has.
We talk about Kerbal. There's a Space Act agreement with NASA and Kerbal where they provided skins to do special missions. They also had an agreement with, I think it was like Angry Birds in Space.
Yeah.
Always looking at opportunities. Lego is another thing. There's all kinds of different partnerships and things because, this is the generations coming up. These are the future employees. When old man Buffington's working, it's going to be these people that we're reaching now will be the scientists and the engineers leading the way.
Absolutely. Hockville, great question, buddy. So the next question is for Matt. It's coming from Inertia TV. So, and this kind of segues into it, doing the outreach. What project at Ames are you like the most excited about?
So the two that are kind of my go-to ones, like hijack it and like give you, I'm gonna give you two. We have this. Well, I would be remiss not to mention Cassini.
Oh yeah.
Just last night, it brought back these crazy images where Cassini was getting towards its end of life. I mean, it finished its mission, and they keep creating more for it, and it keeps moving along. But as they went around Titan, and they went crashing through, like in between Saturn and the nearest rings. The image that you have up now that's an illustration of Cassini passing through the plumes of
that's amazing.
Of Enceladus.
Unbelievable.
And just about maybe 2 weeks ago, NASA did this big announcement where they found like in those plumes are the fundamental molecules of life. So this is a wonderful place if you're looking to drill and send a space probe. It's really fascinating. So Cassini, after doing these pass-throughs, went through, sent back this wonderful images like at 3 o'clock in the morning and sent that stuff back. But the cool thing about this, when Cassini went through those plumes, it wasn't just that information.
Yeah.
They got information from Hubble. It was Hubble. I have to remember back.
Yep.
But all the science that NASA does, it's a mixture of data points. You have land-based telescopes, you have space-based telescopes, and at NASA Ames we have the SOFIA mission.
Oh, that's cool.
SOFIA, it is literally a flying telescope.
Oh yeah.
And it's an infrared telescope, and the difference of that one, where you have a land-based telescope which is fixed on certain, like points, certain like stars it can look at. Same thing with the space ones. But yeah, it's like you can move SOFIA where you want it to be.
It's mounted in the back of a 747, if I remember correctly.
Exactly, and you can change the instrumentation.
That's amazing.
So you
Very
can land
cool.
it. You can't bring Kepler back and fix it. But
Upgrade the technology, the software. Yep.
They have different instruments that they go in, and they fit you some really cool stuff.
That's awesome. I mean, and also, if you want to see Cassini's mission, I'm going to use this as kind of a shameless plug here. You can check out NASA Eyes to see the trajectory that it's going on. I know the gentleman that actually works on NASA Eyes, and you can go on eyes.nasa.gov and see exactly where it's going and the paths that it's on until its mission ultimately ends. So we're going to move on to the next question. Inertia, that was a great question. Thank you, buddy. So the next question comes from M251 Speed. Who are each of the panelists' heroes or role models in the space, scientific, or engineering communities growing up?
Well, we just got the Carl Sagan marathon, so that that was pretty obvious for me. It was absolutely Carl Sagan. That was awesome.
Cool.
As an explainer.
I have to say, without a doubt, Sally Ride.
Yeah.
First,
all right.
first female American astronaut. As somebody who always wanted to be an astronaut, and especially, I really do think that having female role models in the space industry is
Huge.
extraordinarily important
Absolutely.
in terms of increasing diversity. And what she had to go through to be number one, it's never easy punching through that glass ceiling first. So.
I was gonna say, like, as an Ohioan, I'm partial to Glenn.
Absolutely.
Former senator, astronaut. But even I think for the incoming generations, I mentioned, Kepler. We recently, one of NASA Ames' very own, Natalie Battaglia. She's a project scientist on the Kepler mission. And she was just recently named one of Time's most 100 influential people. There's 3 exoplanet hunters on there, but Natalie is fantastic, and I've spent a lot of time sitting with her as she's explaining to other people how Kepler works. How it's if you were to hold your palm up into the sky, and that little patch that your hand is covering is the little patch of sky that Kepler had been looking at, where it confirmed these exoplanets, and then in its as a feat of engineering, when Kepler is held together by these 4 reaction wheels that spin and keep it focused. One broke. All right, well we got 3. We're doing all right. But then the other one broke, and then it starts spinning. But then the engineers figured out if they point it at the sun just right, they can balance that third axis in just the right way. They can milk some more.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Then they can get more views
That's
of more
amazing.
exoplanets.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. 251, thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last question from the viewer Q&A. And I'm going to put a little spin on this question. This question comes from Kerbal01. So I would say, what is your favorite rocket, each 3 of you, from the 20th century? This is like 2000 and down. Any particular favorites come to mind? I mean, mine's the shuttle, I'm not going to lie. I love that thing.
Saturn V.
Saturn V, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's few contenders there, but we still got some.
Just a gigantic, rocket to put a lot into space.
Absolutely.
I'm also going to have to go with the space shuttle. All that it's done, and it's just a beautiful bird to watch fly and
Awesome piece
and
of
come
equipment.
back home.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to stick with the panel so far on the shuttle, but that's also a callback to my dream of being in space camp and having my Technodrome robot hijack the rockets, and then I end up in space. They have to put me in a spacesuit, get air. Wonderful story.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that I grew up with the shuttle, so it's my go-to. You know what I mean? There are many other capable rockets. Saturn V is
Nice.
more capable, but yeah, no, still some good questions
My
all
other
around.
biased one is with the name like Ariane.
You like
The Ariane rockets are.
Those are pretty
They
good.
Is it
are-
pronounced the same?
Pretty good.
It is
Yeah,
well,
all right.
I am also half French, so it's
Ariane.
Ariane. But no, those are some very, very good rockets.
Ariane 5 is very
And,
capable. Absolutely.
They have been throughout the generations. So.
It's like a little mini SLS. That's what I like to call it. It's like it's the same concept. 1.5 STO. It's the same thing.
Right.
It's pretty cool. All right, that was the last question from our viewer Q&A. We're going to move on to. Well, where can we find you guys as we wrap up here? Do you Twitter handles? What do you have?
Well, Universe Today on all the things. So
Absolutely.
on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, just search Universe Today and you'll find it.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
Blue Origin, at Blue Origin, check us out, especially on Twitter. And when we start continue to have more webcasts, come to blueorigin.com and to our YouTube channel. We'll be webcasting more.
Matt?
Yeah, we're at NASA Ames. We always like to use the hashtag NASA Silicon Valley on anything that we do. For me, my sad Twitter account, and you'll see me floating around on Twitter or on the NASA subreddit, Mateo Buff. But if you really want the real NASA stuff, go to at NASA Ames.
Absolutely. And I am EJ_SA on Twitch, and I have the exact same Twitter handle if you care to follow. We're going to wrap it up. That's pretty much going to do it here for our roundtable Q&A. Guys, thank you very much for coming in. This has all been part of Twitch's Space and Science Week going on all week here at Twitch HQ. If you're a big fan of Space and Science Week, Twitch actually has T-shirts out for Science Week that you can purchase. Limited run here, so you probably would want to get on that. Those are, oh, look at that, look at that.
Those are cool.
Kappa in space. Okay, that's those are excellent. I've
Boldly
just
going.
decided boldly going where no Twitch viewer
streamer.
has gone before. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to talk about here is you want to tune in tomorrow. I'd follow this channel. Tune in tomorrow for Twitch Weekly. As part of Twitch's Space and Science Week, we've been showing Cosmos here in marathons all week. Tomorrow we actually have a Q&A with Ann Druyan, who is the wife of Carl Sagan. That should be pretty fun. I'd probably see that. I'm gonna watch that. I don't know about you guys. So that's gonna do it here for our roundtable Q&A. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. And I hope you all have a great day. Or night.